welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into something kind of puzzling about American food, specifically fish. You look at the U.S., right? We've got this massive coastline, huge ocean resources. We control, over 4 million square miles of prime fishing territory? You'd think we'd be swimming in domestic seafood.
You really would. It's one of the largest zones in the world.
Exactly. But here's the kicker, and this is wild. Almost 90%, 90, of the seafood we actually eat here, it's imported. And that leads to this enormous seafood trade deficit. We're talking over $20 billion a year. Just gone.
Yeah, it's a huge outflow. Money just leaving the economy to buy fish from elsewhere.
So our mission today is to unpack the government's plan to flip this script. We're looking at a recent presidential executive order, EO 14276. It came out in April 2025. It's called Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness. We want to figure out, what policies are in there, what does the government think is broken, and how are they trying to fix it?
And the EO, it lays out a pretty clear mission. It's basically got three main pillars. First, tackle what it calls federal overregulation here at home. Second, get tougher on unfair foreign trade stuff. And third, secure the whole supply chain, from the boat right to your plate.
Okay, 3 pillars.
Right. And it's worth saying this isn't totally out of the blue. It builds on an earlier effort, EO 13921, from back in May 2020, which they say was successful for a bit. But this new order argues that American fishermen got, and I'm quoting here, once again crushed by regulations and bad policies over the last 4 years. So they feel they need new steps.
Crushed. Strong language.
It is. So the overall policy direction is clear. Boost the harvest, make life easier for commercial fishermen, fight illegal fishing, protect our own markets.
Okay, let's take that first part then, the domestic side. Federal overregulation. The EO seems to really zero in on this. It lists things like catch limits being too tight, using old or bad data for decisions, being slow on new tech, and it even mentions selling our fishing grounds to foreign offshore wind companies. That's pretty pointed. So the idea is red tape is holding fishermen back.
That's the narrative presented in the order, yes. That regulatory hurdles are a major bottleneck.
So if that's the problem they see, what's the fix? How does the order say they'll, lighten that regulatory load?
Well, the plan is for things to move fast. The Secretary of Commerce, working with Health and Human Services, got told to immediately look at suspending, changing, or just getting rid of rules that overly burden the fishing, aquaculture, and processing folks.
Immediately. How fast is immediately?
Get this. The Commerce Secretary had a 30-day deadline. 30 days from April 17th, 2025, when the order was dated, to identify the absolute most heavily overregulated fisheries that needed action. Like right now.
Wow, 30 days. That seems incredibly fast for government work. Is that even realistic?
It's definitely aggressive. Signals real urgency.
Or maybe just, making a point. Does it risk cutting rules that actually do something important for conservation?
That's the potential downside, yeah. The tension is always there. But the order does say the review should target specific fisheries. The idea is likely to focus on rules where the economic pain seems way higher than the conservation gain, or maybe where the science behind the rule is, frankly, shaky or outdated. That 30-day clock forces them to act on known problems first.
Okay, so target the worst offenders first.
Right, and it's not just the secretary. The regional fishery management councils, the local bodies, they also got a deadline, 180 days. They need to send in their updated ideas for boosting production, stabilizing local markets, and making fishing more profitable in their areas.
So streamline things at home to compete with imports. That makes sense as step 1. But then Section 2 talks about modernization, which sounds like spending money. It says the National Marine Fisheries Service needs to bring in less expensive and more reliable technologies and use cooperative research for assessing fish stocks. How does that fit with cutting regulatory costs? Seems like you're adding tech costs now.
But it's about shifting the costs. Think of it as regulating smarter, not necessarily less. A lot of the current burden comes from slow, clunky, bureaucratic processes, like relying on old-school boat surveys that take ages, cost a fortune, and might lead to overly cautious or just plain wrong catch limits because the data's stale.
Right, outdated data again.
Exactly. So the order pushes for things like better sensors, maybe simpler data collection methods, and cooperative research basically means getting fishermen involved in collecting the data. The whole point is to get closer to real-time understanding of what's happening in the ocean. If you have better, faster data, management can be more flexible.
Okay, I see. So maybe allow more fishing when the stocks are clearly healthy, based on real data, not last year's guess.
Precisely. Reduce the uncertainty, which is a cost in itself. Lower risk for the industry.
Gotcha. So better data, maybe more flexible fishing. But you still need someone to buy the fish. Which brings us to this America First seafood strategy.
Yeah, this is interesting. It's not just about catching more fish, it's about selling it. Commerce and agriculture have to team up on this strategy. It's about promoting the production, the marketing, the sale, and even the export of U.S. seafood, plus strengthening our own processing capabilities so we're not just shipping raw fish out.
And how do they plan to boost demand here at home?
There's a really specific instruction for the Department of Agriculture. They need to speed up efforts to tell American consumers, you listening, about how healthy seafood is. And importantly, they need to increase seafood purchases in federal nutrition programs.
So using the government's own buying power.
Exactly. Think schools, food banks, other programs. Create a guaranteed large-scale domestic market. Pump demand directly into the system for U.S. caught fish.
Okay, that's a big lever to pull.
Huh.
Let's switch gears now to that $20 billion problem.
Yeah.
The flood of imports and unfair competition. The EO clearly sees this as undermining U.S. fishermen.
Absolutely. It acknowledges that straight up.
So it gave the Secretary of Commerce and the U.S. Trade Representative, the USTR, just 60 days to come up with a comprehensive seafood trade strategy. What kind of foreign practices are they targeting?
Two main things jump out. First is IUU fishing. That's illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing.
Right, the pirate fishing stuff?
Kinda, yeah. It's a massive global issue. A fish caught illegally, outside quotas, ignoring conservation rules. It floods the market with cheap product that legal U.S. fishermen just can't compete with on price. It hurts the oceans and the wallets here.
Okay, IUU's number one. What's number two?
What the order calls unjustified non-tariff barriers. Basically, sneaky ways other countries make it hard for legal U.S. seafood exports to get into their markets. Think excessive inspections, weird labeling rules, that kind of thing. The USTR has to really scrutinize major seafood-producing countries, looking hard at both IUU fishing links and, very significantly, the use of forced labor in seafood supply chains.
Wow, forced labor. That's obviously horrific on a human level, but the EO is framing it as a trade issue.
Yes, specifically as something the USTR needs to tackle using trade enforcement tools.
How tough can they get?
The order explicitly tells the USTR to consider using powerful authorities, specifically mentioning Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974.
Section 301, remind me, that's the big one, right?
That's the one. It's often called the heavy hammer. It lets the USTR slap retaliatory tariffs or other restrictions on countries if their practices are deemed unfair or discriminatory to U.S. businesses. Linking forced labor directly to Section 301 action, that really ramps up the pressure.
So potential tariffs against countries tied to IUU or forced labor seafood.
That seems to be the implication, yes. And there's more on the import side. The order mandates changes to the Seafood Import Monitoring Program, SIMP.
How so?
It says to pull back the recent expansion of SIMP that covered, in its view, unnecessary species. So instead of casting a super wide net, the plan is to focus the monitoring resources more effectively on shipments that are genuinely high risk, specifically imports from nations known for dodgy fishing practices.
And the money saved from checking fewer types of fish.
That saved money is supposed to be plowed back into doing more thorough checks, like physical inspections at U.S. ports. The goal is to actually block the bad stuff, the IUU seafood, from getting into the country in the first place. Make the net tighter where it counts.
Okay, a more targeted import defense. Now, there's one more big piece here, and it's about where fishing can actually happen. Section 4 talks about marine national monuments.
Right. This is a pretty significant land use, or rather CU's mandate.
The Secretary of Commerce, working with the Secretary of the Interior, has 180 days to review all existing marine national monuments.
Yes, and this is probably the most controversial part, politically speaking.
Why the review?
The stated purpose is to give recommendations back to the president about whether any of these protected monuments should be opened up to commercial fishing.
Opened up. These are protected areas, right? For science, history.
Exactly. They were set aside to protect specific things, maybe historic shipwrecks, unique coral reefs, scientifically important areas, so opening them to commercial fishing, well, that's a big potential shift.
Yeah, that sounds like a guaranteed fight between fishing groups and environmental folks. What if the review finds that fishing would wreck the very things the monument was set up to protect?
The order does address that, at least on paper. It says the recommendations have to consider if opening an area to fishing would still be consistent with the preservation goals that were stated when the monument was created.
Consistent with?
But, let's be frank, the whole thrust of this EO is towards increasing domestic production and harvest. So this review definitely puts the burden of proof on keeping areas closed. It could lead to some real battles over access to these waters.
No kidding. Okay, so stepping back, this deep dive really shows quite a sweeping strategy. You've got efforts to cut red tape at home, push for better tech and data, use government buying to boost demand, and then this really aggressive stance on trade going after illegal fishing and forced labor, potentially with tariffs, and even reviewing protected areas.
It's definitely multi-pronged, a clear attempt to tackle that 90% import figure from several angles.
The stated goal seems to be stabilizing our own markets, becoming less reliant on imports, maybe getting American seafood back in a leadership spot, and presumably, for you listening, potentially impacting the price and origin of fish you buy.
And the timeline is, as we noted, incredibly ambitious. So many short deadlines crammed in there. 30 days for this, 60 for that, 180 for the monument reviews and council plans, which I think leaves us with a pretty big question for you, consumer, right? Given that huge structural reality, 90% of your seafood is imported, how quickly do you really think these changes, especially the potentially controversial ones like opening monuments relying on new real-time data systems, will actually filter down? How soon before you genuinely see a difference in what's available, what it costs, and where it comes from when you're at the supermarket or the fish market? That lag time, the real-world impact, that's still a big unknown.